All right, everyone, back out here on the next day to continue splitting apart this Dana 44. Before I take anything apart, I'd like to go ahead and label and punch everything from its side that it came from. So this way I'm totally organized when I put it back together. I used to tape stuff and then write, passenger, driver, but then once you take it apart and you go to sandblast it, now the tape is off and you don't remember. So I go ahead and punch in the letter P and the letter D, and then we'll know where everything came from. Now you can see letter P, passenger. I doubled up on the leaf spring. Hell yeah, what do you think about this axle? Oh, all right, thanks. Okay, those suckers are on there good. Grab my breaker bar. Let's see. Oh, man. Tight. Nice. There's a little bit of gunk in the top of these threads from the engine, so we're gonna hey-o. And as I'm doing this, you might notice I'm bracing the backside of the leaf spring with my knee because I'm pulling this holding this way and I don't want to pull the whole axle off the jack stands. And also as I'm pulling, I'm mindful of my fingers and my knuckles, and if I slip, what am I going to hit into? Kind of nothing here, so that's good. If I slip here, just got to be careful, but we're good. Little things you learn along the way as you wrench on stuff. You don't want to really bust your knuckles up if you don't have to. Now we can get this off the rest of the way with the impact. Usually the U-bolts kind of expand out as they go into these plates, so you kind of gotta squeeze them in a little bit to pop them out. Like they're out this way, and you kind of gotta squeeze a little bit and they'll slide right through. Just like that. Not critical to keep them side to side, but I like to still label them and put them back on the side they came off because, well, that's the way they were before. May as well put them back together again the way that they were. Notice on the top of the leaf spring mount, this guy right here is for a front sway bar, and this truck actually has a front sway bar, so we're gonna get that put on this thing too. Be kind of cool. And I kind of like to put everything back together the way I got it, so this way while I store it for a day, a week, a month, however long it turns into, I remember the way it came from, and then ultimately I can take this, chemical wash it, get it cleaned, degreased, sandblast it, paint it, make it look like new. And that being said, this leaf spring is just chilling up top, and it's indexed by this little knob on the bottom. But there you have it. There is your driver's side leaf spring off. Then we'll do the same over here on the passenger side. This side's a little more unique where you've only got one U-bolt over here, and then on this side, because of the closeness to the axle carrier, you've actually got these two threaded studs coming up, and they kind of serve in the same way as the U-bolt, but these obviously stays apart. These obviously stays apart here of the carrier, and then this U-bolt's gonna come out. I know Roger told me to get rid of that hammer yesterday, but sorry, Roger. Had to do it. Cool. Go ahead and get these calipers off. It's a pretty simple little setup. Usually they've got a bolt that goes to the back. I didn't think that's all it would be holding them on, but what do you know? We're gonna replace these rubber flex hoses, even though they don't look like they're getting too dry rotted and cracked. Better safe than sorry. You never know. It looks to me like these upper and lower ball joints are pretty fresh, even though they're kind of dry. Pulling on the disc and hub assembly, and it wasn't given any play before. So these might be able to stay and save us a lot of headache and trying to remove this knuckle and get everything split apart. So I might leave the upper and lower ball joints, gonna replace this drag link probably, and at least get new, some new joints and connections there. These calipers, kind of wanted to pull these out and see what they look like. Whoever did brakes on these did it recently enough that these pads look like they've got totally fresh meat on them. The back side here, not seeing any leaks coming from it, but this is looking a little bit dry and worn, so probably go ahead and get new calipers. Can't hurt, because the next thing you know, you start driving this truck and the seal in here breaks and it just starts leaking, and that's no good. So I don't think these would be too hard to find. Just go ahead and crack this flex hose free from the caliper. All right, caliper is free. It's a little bit more than that rag bargained for. Also just remembered I wanted to label the front side of the leaf springs to where they go to the front of the vehicle, so this way I don't get them mixed up. I think they're equidistant from the center mark, but just in case, now I won't forget. Cutie? So long, summer, no more air conditioning. Last little mystery I want to solve before it gets dark. Pull off this front cover and see what it looks like in here. Hopefully it's nice and clean, and we're not gonna have to do a full rebuild on this axle, but we shall find out here in a moment. Let's get this brake line out of the way right quick. Hopefully, number one, there is gear oil in this. And I believe there to be, because you can see that it was leaking a little bit over there. And that's partially also why I want to do this, because I don't want to paint this and have it leak. I want to reseal this cover. So, yeah, that's why we're doing it. Inspect for bits of junk and reseal it. And this little tab here should include the gear ratio on it. And it's still legible. I don't know if you guys can see that. 3.54. So that is the gear ratio for the front as well. And we knew that on the rear of this truck, it also had a 354 ratio. So matching ratios up front and out back. I don't want to introduce any dirt and debris into the axle if I don't have to. That gear oil looks pretty clean. Looks pretty fresh too. Could have easily just been replaced by the guy before me, but we'll find out here right now. Oh yeah, that looks pretty clean down there. Looks really good. And while there's 20 bucks of gear oil sinking down this thing, it's worth doing this to make sure that I'm not putting this truck on the road with a bunch of issues. Like this, you can actually see this buildup. Some kind of gunk down here. Oh yeah, she's a little sludgy on the bottom. We need to do a little bit further looking. Looks to me like you put new gear oil and didn't really clean out the sludge from the inside. I'm not seeing a lot of speckles and everything, and it doesn't look all too dirty. I think this calls for just letting this thing drain out and getting it a really good deep clean with some brake cleaner and everything in there, and then going ahead and filling this thing back up with some new gear oil, putting a new gasket on this diff cover, and I'm calling it good, because The gear mesh and the teeth on the ring gear look pretty good. Not really seeing a lot of issues there. And really not an issue with any lash right there. Everything looks okay to me. So I'm gonna call this thing good. Like I said, let's just drain it out, clean it out, refill it. I'm also using the trusty radio flyer to hold all the parts coming off this thing, so this way I can kind of keep them here in the garage and not have everything in the way, and I can move this around the way I need it to, and also get stuff in and out. So I think I'm gonna call this a night because I've got some stuff to do tomorrow. Little pretty sunset we got going on here. Pickle fork action. Just finally broke this drag link off, so now we can get this thing and find ourselves a new one. And then I'm gonna go ahead in here and try and find this lock ring that should be hiding in there and pull that out so we can get this whole hub and disc brake off, and then go ahead and make things new. Okay, drag link is out, and I've been picking around underneath here, and I finally found right here, you can see it. It's hard to tell with all the bearing grease in there, but right there, see that? It's a little lock ring. All right, and now you can see I've captured the end of the ring, and just like that, it's free. Cool. Look at this sunset we got going on, guys. Beautiful. Absolutely beautiful. Put two of these little screwy guys back on here, and I think this should allow us to walk this out. Maybe. See what that does. Okay, after a little bit more investigating, I recognize that there's another snap ring here on the inside, just on this axle, end of the axle shaft. So we'll get this out of here and continue. There we go. It's hard to see everything going on in here with all this grease, so now we've got it going a little bit more smooth. There we go. Okay, now that makes sense as to why this thing wasn't coming out. So now this should pop right out, and it does. Cool. All right, so this whole little, I don't know if you would call this a clutch assembly or whatnot for, you know, where it locks in to get your locking front four-wheel drive, but nonetheless, we'll take this over to Rogers and degrease it and clean it up, and then re-grease it and pack it before we put it back in. For now, we'll just put it down on our towel. Noticing that everything rotates really nice and freely right now with the way it's set up. Looks like it's a 2.5-inch opening. We're looking here on the back side of that clutch piece that we pulled out, so this matches up to the reverse of what that face of those lock nuts should be, so I think I need a 2.5-inch socket. Ran over to Napa and grabbed one of these 2 3/8 special sockets, and this is what fits that lock nut. So now, just like that, now we can get this thing off. These are a little bit tricky to go in, so you kind of want to guide it in first onto the 4 notches like that, and then get your socket on there. Otherwise, you're kind of fishing around. And I've got a jack on this side of the axle, so this way when it rotates down right now, it's not going to spin the axle off the stands. And there it is. So that was on there like snug. It wasn't super hard to get off. So we'll kind of take note of that for how we're going to reinstall this thing. So we'll put it back on. So we don't want to put too much tension on everything. All right, lock washer number 1 is off, and that's all it looks like. After talking over with Roger, I inspected the ball joint parts here at the end of the drag link, and they're also in really good shape. They're nice and firm still, and it's not really sloppy at all. So we're just gonna put new boots on this and reuse it. And then to help out with the angle of steering, what we're gonna do is, he showed me you can order a different one of these steering arms. You can kind of see how when you're looking flat like this, it's only got about an inch or so of a lift. The height of where it mounts here relative to where that drag link connects into it. So yeah, it looks like to me it's maybe an inch, 2 inches of a lift. And they sell ones that have a 4-inch lift, which will get it up to this height, and then it'll help out with that angle of steering and so much more for the truck and make it handle a lot better too. So we're gonna order one of these while we're gone at SEMA. But before we head out, again, we're out here today just playing around with getting out these hubs and disc brakes because I want to see if we can get these resurfaced. All right, now we'll get this inner lock nut out. This is what we're looking at now inside of there. There's a second lock nut. I've seen videos where I've seen the backside of these nuts have like a little notch in it, and then there's kind of met into those holes on that other nut, but I'm not seeing that here. Nonetheless, we'll keep going and tell you guys what we discovered. All right, I figured out what I did wrong. This guy with the little holes in it is actually just the locking washer, and it's got a little notch in it, which you can kind of see right here. That notch is supposed to line up with this 12 o'clock position notch in the axle shaft. And what I just did by trying to loosen it like that, I probably snapped it, and then I popped that notch out of the 12 o'clock position notch. So once I get this back into its right orientation, I should be able to just pull this thing out with a magnet or, you know, a little pick. So let me get this thing back in place. Okay, you just heard that click right back into place. So now that notch at the top is lined up with this notch in the axle, and yep, out it comes. I broke it. You can see right here. Right here, I split it. So we'll have to get a new one of these lock rings. But that's not the end of the world. Guess that's the price I pay for thinking I knew what I was doing here. Sometimes you make mistakes. You guys can learn from me. All right, now that that spacer's out of there, we can get the final nut from the inside. And it feels like this was, all right, this was already loosened when I was popping off that other guy. So that would explain that, why it was loose. Should be able to pop this guy out now. Sweet. I was expecting a bearing to come flying out of it, but it didn't. Spindle for the front. And well, here's our bearing. It just didn't come out because it was so gunked up with everything. So probably gonna replace these bearings, get them cleaned off and take a look at it. Wouldn't hurt not to at this point. It would just be a wise decision having it this far taken apart. So we'll go ahead and do that on the other side, and then this axle is pretty much ready to go ahead and get rebuilt and painted up, put back together. Just wiped off the bearing and getting a closer look at it. They actually don't look too terrible, all the roller bearings in here, but still, I think it's always a wise decision once you get to this point. It's really not that expensive to replace bearings, and you never know, somewhere down the road you might thank yourself for having done this. So we'll get these replaced. Looks like it's LM501340. So we'll get ourselves a new set. Thank you guys for watching, and stay tuned here for more on the Power Wagon update.